Okay. Oh, I see it right there in the middle. Continue. Okay.
This is Vicar Lynn Marlowe, and we are speaking today with Bill Wood on March 17, 2021. Thank you, Bill, for taking time to tell us about your life.
Well, it's kind of fun. I've enjoyed it so long. Um, and so that will, well, I'll just get started. I was born on the day that presidents were inaugurated, January 20th. But I don't think there was a president who was inaugurated or sworn in that day. But I always considered some kind of present, and I'm glad I got a different present this year. So that was in 44, and I am now 77. So another double digit. And I like to play with numbers, but I'm not necessarily, well, I'm better at math than I am at spelling. So I was born in Western Nebraska. My parents were from Winford and Winford and Howard, just up the road. My parents met at a dance, that was in a wedding church probably, or a church. And so then I had two brothers that were born before I was. And there was a sister that I had who was born much earlier, and her mother had died in childhood. And she had also lived close to her father. And so that was another part of the family that I have grown up in. My sister's son was like 18 months younger than I am. So he's 75 or 76. And so that's one of those extended family pieces. My grandfather Wood moved from Owatonna, Minnesota to the end of the rail line at the beginning of the century before we're in now, and lived there all his life and was a business person. So
What type of business?
I think he had 7 or 8. When they were there, they were managing a hotel.
Okay.
Then he sold other kinds of things. He ended in a hardware store. And that was Winford. And if anybody knows anything about Winford, there's a large brick building there that was the schoolhouse, I think until 1960. And since then, it's been part of the sous vide processing honey. So my mother was born in a farmhouse in the last century, not this one. And she had 11 siblings, and they were spread out over a period of time. I got to meet my grandmother and had slept the night at her house one night, and she had palsy, and she knew how to fill her cup so that she didn't spill any as she was shaking it back and forth. And it was, I didn't comment on it to her, but it was sort of like an amazing thing that old people do. And now that I am one, it's kind of fun. So I was talking about my relatives. I have 2 older brothers, and then I have a younger sister who now lives in Sioux Falls. She was born in 1960. And so I haven't lived with all of my brothers and sisters, but I know all of them, and it's kind of a fun family. And it's different than other people that I know because it's extended out over a period of time. And my parents, I think, wanted to get away from their family, and so they were in Nebraska. My father worked as a part of the Rural Electrification Association. And we spent a summer in Tyndall when I was preschool. We were living in a mobile home then. And the house was right across the street from a pond. And it was kind of fun because I went over and fished in the pond and brought back some small fish and let the cat play with them. So that was my first good time in South Dakota. And then that was when we started traveling. I was just 5 or so. My father had fallen off one of the poles that he was climbing and had broken his back. And so he was laid up. And while he was recuperating, then he did some other things. And so my brothers worked on farms and ranches in the western Nebraska area. So they weren't around to harass me, although that seemed to be their very purpose, and that continued. One of my brothers is always nice to me if it's just he and I. But if there's somebody else, then he's dissing me. So I guess that's why I'm kind of thick-skinned and get along with people well. So here I am, and I got my trains off the track, Lynn.
Well, I'm just curious. When you were growing up, what did you think you wanted to be? What kind of career did you want?
We'll have to wait for that part of the story because I don't think I
Okay.
thought about it. It was there were a lot of children in the places where our mobile homes were parked. Well, you could call me a gypsy because there were people around that drove sort of in caravans, and they'd talk about them. But we were sort of a community because we're transients. And so I lived in Kansas, a couple different places, and then we moved into South Dakota. In the late 40s, well, not too much far after that, my 2 older brothers were in high school. And so my parents decided to stay in David City, which is the county seat of Butler County in the state of Nebraska. It's 60 miles west of Omaha, just south on 81 out of South Dakota. And when we were living there, we did come up and visit with relatives. So I have some cousins that are my age we had fun messing around and doing kid things. Because in all essence, I was a city kid. Well, I lived in a town with streets, and that's different than being on the farm. So I've never really wanted to be out alone. And I guess that's why I've continued to be and do things in the city. So that pretty much rubbed. I can't think of anything else that's coming out of my childhood. So well, my parents worked at a bomb making plant near Wahoo, Nebraska, and that was during the Korean War. And so when that was over, that closed, and we moved back to North Platte, where my parents had the house that they had rented out. So that's where I finished 6th grade and then graduated from high school in North Platte. I was active in school, and during the time I was there, I was a member of the Nebraska All-State. And there was I believe a veterans organization that manages the boy states throughout the country in all 50 states. And there's also a program for girl states. So I was a participant when I was a junior. And then one other year, I won a speaking event, and I got to go on a 2-week trip. Well, it was at least that, from North Platte. The bus left in Omaha, and we traveled across the northern part of the states into Washington, D.C. The first night, we stayed at Gettysburg, and then we went into Washington, D.C., and we were there for 2 days or 3, and then we went to New York City, and we went to the United Nations, and then we traveled up along the Niagara Falls and over to Detroit, and then back to Nebraska. So that was a 2-week trip. Eventful in my life, because that's where I met my future spouse. We were both song leaders because we were both Lutherans and sang. We would lead songs of the group. There were I think probably 8 adults and there may have been 2 buses, because there were 60 of us, I think. And so it was really a fun trip to be away from home, and I probably took about 600 pictures I guess that's when that bug hit me because I still do pictures or take a lot. And now with my iPhone, I can copy everything except I've gotten into trouble with the cloud because it's full and they want my stuff out. So
Oh, no.
I have to call the Geek Squad and have them help. Well, I know I could probably find somebody from church that'll do that. They're all good kids that know how to handle phones and what they're doing. I don't. Never learned everything. So I had a great time in high school. Connie, my former spouse, lived in Grand Island, and her father was president of the Missouri Synod Lutheran Church in Grand Island. And I belonged to First Lutheran, which was LCA or whatever one of those sets of the predecessor bodies, as they're called by people in church work, I guess, or at least that's what they did call them, if that's still around.
Yes.
So there I am off the track again. I was talking about, Lynn, what was I talking about?
You were telling me about your past wife.
Oh, right. So that trip was really kind of fun, and I will get back to that, I guess, along the way. I graduated in 1962 from high school, and I was enrolled at the University of Nebraska, Lincoln. And I need to point out that that was the only university in the state, except for Creighton, until all of those schools around the state became universities. You know, just like Augustana here, it had to become a university. So anyway, I shouldn't trash them. They were fun places to be. And I learned a lot. I majored in geography, and I wasn't sure what I really wanted to do. I ended up spending 5 years as an undergraduate at the University in Lincoln, and that was at the height of a big deal in Southeast Asia. But I guess I knew somebody on the draft board because I didn't get any letter from the draft board, and many people did.
Interesting.
So yeah, well, the reverse of that was I moved to Milwaukee, Wisconsin after I graduated, and had a teaching contract there. They hired 800 teachers that fall, including my wife and I. And that was because there was a high turnover in educators in the city. I stayed there for, well, let's see, I left teaching in 1980. So
now, what did you teach?
Students.
No kidding. What subject?
I taught a lot of things. Don't do that. Don't say that. They were good kids, but my classes, well, that's a whole long story about me. While we were there, I was a member of the teachers union, and I guess I'm an activist, so I have to tell about the story. We went to Madison, Wisconsin, to talk to the legislature about increasing teacher salaries. At the time we started in 1967, the teacher salary was $5,850 for 10 months. You could have part of that pay set aside, and they'd pay you 3 more checks during the summer if you wanted. So we were there, and I went off. The second year I was there teaching, I had been appointed or voted in as a building representative for the union. So we went to Madison and we talked to legislators, and it did have some impact. But when I got back, the teacher used this sort of, he was always clutching himself. And so he was like, well, I need to see you in my office after school. So he sort of laid this out that it was not good for me to leave my classroom. And I said, well, Mr. Versado, when I came here, I didn't really know anything about Wisconsin geography or what the state was, and I have to teach that class in my class, and you've sent me there. So as far as I'm concerned, it was my paying for an in-service meeting to learn about the state legislature.
How did he take that?
Well, he didn't. He was just sort of, well, yeah, we got along because he couldn't really harass me as a building representative. And so I enjoyed working with the kids. I discovered along the way that I didn't enjoy the teacher's lunchroom because people were downgrading kids and harassing them, and I didn't like the attitude, and I said, well, I don't have to be here. So I spent my time in other rooms and library, and so that was kind of fun. While I was teaching, I was active in both the state and local education associations, and I was elected to go to the conventions. There was a convention in Atlantic City that I attended. Well, there was one of them. At one of the conventions, there was a resolution to establish an environmental education task force. And I was appointed the chair of that task force by the president of NEA. So I chaired that task force, and then after that was over, I was appointed to the Human Relations Commission of the National Education Association. So I guess I got around because that was kind of a hobby to go to different events and see them. Then I also got a scholarship when I was working on my master's degree from the NEA, and I was able to get my master's in Wisconsin at the University of Wisconsin.
What did you major in?
The degree is in social and philosophical foundations of education. So I'm an educational philosopher.
I believe it.
So, well, so that was those were a couple things that I enjoyed. When I taught for 7 years, and then I had a sabbatical. I finished my master's degree, and I taught a class in human relations at the university in the School of Education while I was there. And then I returned to the classroom schools the year after. The school board in Milwaukee was sued by some parents regarding their education, and so the federal government ordered integration at the school system in Milwaukee.
Okay.
And so I ended up in a new school. The title of the school was Jackie Robinson Middle School, and so they were at least recognizing people of importance, and I think he was the second African-American to have a school named after him. There was another elementary school that was named after Mary McLeod Bethune. And there are a considerable number of African-Americans of this continent origin in Milwaukee, but there are a lot of other refugees and immigrants from around the country. The churches in Milwaukee worked actively doing those things, and I was involved in 2 or 3 of those that we worked on that I don't really remember much about, so I won't you ask me about that.
Okay.
So, where are we?
Well, you've been bouncing around, so let me see.
Bouncing is fun.
What brought you here to Sioux Falls and St. Mark's?
Well, I left Milwaukee. There's a whole predecessor piece to that. I had, I have this, let me see where I need to grab a picture.
Okay.
This is a picture of my house in Milwaukee.
That's cute.
It wasn't that color when I got it. I'm not sure it ever was green. It may have been. It probably was green because those are the colors that I picked out. So it was in the Brewers Hill district. And so the construction on this building began in 1894. And I purchased it somewhere along 91. And I acquired the property from one of my tax clients. Let's transition. After I left teaching, I started working at H&R Block, Hank and Dick's place, as I used to call it. They're still doing tax returns, but not like we did then, because there were no computers. There were only calculators, pencils, and erasers. And then you went to the copy machine and made copies, and that was what it was. So I started doing taxes in 1980, and I continued. Well, there's one I need to work on this afternoon. I had a lot of people come to have me do their taxes, and they were referring lots of people, and I had about a 98% return rate. I always sent out a letter in January about the time you get your W-2s to say I'm still doing taxes, and people would come and bring other people, and so I had a very high turnaround, and then I had a lot of people who moved out of town and wanted to send them back because they liked what I did. So I still have one of my teacher friends that's in Milwaukee, and she's now retired, but I'll get her taxes done later. But it's kind of fun, and I still work through carefully, and I'm really not looking for any other business. So after I finished that, I finished a tax season April 15th, and I was sort of like a zombie until the 1st of June. And I just decided that I needed to get out of that. And so I drove out here to see my sister, and I decided, I think before I came, I looked up, I tried to find where there might be some mobile homes that were for sale, because I thought that was the easiest way for me to transition out of my Victorian. But it was fun. And I did find a place here. And so I've been here since, I came out in 2012, and I officially established residence the 1st of January, 2013.
And when did you come to St. Mark's?
Well, let's see. I had gone to what is now the west side. It's as well as the new church on the west side, on Marion Road, and north of it's on the northwest side, and I had attended their meetings at the Boys Ranch, the Corrosion Boys Ranch north of 90, when they were summoned. I spoke with a pastor at Capitol Drive, and he recommended that as one of the places to go. When he retired, it wasn't Capitol Drive, it was Capitol Drive is the church that we joined in Milwaukee. Peace Lutheran Church on 41st Street. 41st Street is where this pastor had been. They had been in Alaska and moved to Sioux Falls. And then when he retired, they started coming to St. Mark's. And he is now living with his wife near Minneapolis, where they have kids. So people are mobile and go and do different things.
Yes.
Whether it's becoming pasteurized, as you are, or other. Somewhere along the line, I ended up Oh, well, so Anita Hill, not the other Anita Hill, but the Reverend Anita Hill, who was in Minneapolis, or actually St. Paul at St. Paul Reformation. Um, and I called her because I'd worked with her in Lutherans Concerned, and she'd been in Milwaukee many times. And so that was a part of, it's like, Anita, who do you know here? Where can I go? So she sent a note back, or emails the true thing. So she emailed her friend at Augustana University, and the woman that is referred to as the other Lori,
Okay.
Lori Jingling, that may not be the correct, Lori Jingling, who is the bishop of part of Montana or out west. So she suggested that, she sent me an email and said, I recommend that you check out St. Mark's. And so I went, I think, to a Saturday night service, and that was pleasant because it was much like the church that I had attended in Milwaukee, called the Village Church, which had been an urban mission to the apartment dwellers in downtown Milwaukee in 1957. So it was really a 10-year-old church when I started attending, and it was in a storefront. It was, I can't remember what had been in there before, but they got a lease at the bottom level of a huge apartment complex, and that's where we met for some time. And then there was a building that came on the market, and we bought that, and it was by the river in Milwaukee. And so they added a facility and made that church. And I was on the council there for probably, well, you have to take a break, thank God, that you don't have to go year after year. But it was a good group of people, and there were lots of things that we did, just like St. Mark's has in the past, which you've missed out on. Sorry.
Yeah.
I've got a tape of Lucia.
Oh, that's cool.
A CD. Yeah, you can see what it was.
That would be great. I would love that.
I'm trying to find that. So, but there's some others around probably. And then there's all the cooking things that we did. I really enjoy St. Mark's because I can go to church when I want. And I've probably for the past 20 years or so listened to a program called On Being. It used to be Speaking of Faith, now it's called On Being. Krista Tippett is the collector or person, and she's on every Sunday morning. She's actually on several other times, and I guess I could find a place to listen if I want. I know it's online now, so that's no more problems. But so that I spend my Sunday mornings listening to whoever she's interviewing, and they all have very good stories. St. Mark's read a book by Padre Ote. He's an Irish Catholic priest who is now on the staff of On Being, which is out of Minneapolis. That's a great piece.
So, Bill, is there one thing you can tell us about yourself that people just don't know?
Thought about that. And if I didn't get it written down, you aren't going to find out. Oh, well, what do people not? I'm pretty direct most of the time when I'm talking, and I don't volunteer to speak a lot. And so usually people listen when I'm talking and will argue or compliment. And so I guess when I was growing up, I didn't really have a lot of friends. And then when I got connected in junior high, I met friends in junior high who were parts of worshiping church communities with their families. And I was invited to go to the Methodist and to the Presbyterian, and I went to the Lutheran. There was, well, there are those cloistered people called Missouri Synod folks who don't pray with others. And so it was, if it was Lutheran, it was the homogenetic precursor of ELCA. So I enjoyed going to church and going to church in different places. When we were traveling, I know that my mother took me to Vacation Bible School 2 or 3 times, and I've had recollections of those later. And it sort of like molds into the things that are going on at the churches. When we started at Capitol Drive, it was Connie and I, it was High Church, English District of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. That was a compromise with her parents. You know, you can't let your children fall too far from. However, after we were divorced, I didn't go back to Capitol Drive. I knew the pastors who was there, and he had baptized and confirmed my daughter, and well, our daughter. I can't take credit for all of it. And so that's a whole nother story that I wasn't going to talk about. Anyway, the pastor that confirmed my daughter was, I found out later, a member of the board of Lutherans Concern at the same time that I became a member of the board of Lutherans Concern. So,
Bill, can you
yes.
tell people what Lutherans Concerned is? Because I don't know if everybody would understand what that is.
Well, yes, it has a longer, well, the organization was started in the mid-70s, and Lutherans Concern North America was the original title, and it was created by a pastor who'd gotten some money from the national church body in Minneapolis. And there were several programs that this person started that were basically community-based ministries to people who weren't doing, they were sort of like lost and needed to be, well, that's a poor image, where there wasn't a place for people to meet and gather. So the person brought together 3 or 4 lesbians and about 5 or 6 other gay men and women who were active in the Lutheran Church around the country. And so we started meeting, and we've continued to have meetings every other year. That are celebrations of people coming together who identify as being gay or lesbian. And so that was a place for me to go where I could meet other people who are queer or gay. And so frequently, I guess at this point in my life, I consider myself to be queer, which is different, you know, hey. And most kids know what that is, especially once they're past junior high. So the reality is God loves everybody.
Yes,
Or
he does.
if you're going to say God doesn't love somebody, you're going to have to prove it to me. You know, let's sit down and read. And so I've done a lot of that. And I enjoyed being out with others. I was active with the Sioux Falls Pride Association. Actually, it was not Pride, but it was, well, there were several gay organizations that I belonged to, and most of them had difficulty coming together as people. People would argue about little things and say nasty things, and then the person who would volunteer to do it would leave. You know, and it's not like church usually, but there are some people where that happens, and I haven't really left any because anybody said anything. And I haven't been told to leave or not come back. I may have once, but I can't remember that.
And I know you have some pictures for us.
I do. I do. So perhaps I need to make another explanation. Um, if I show you my picture of my daughter, and I just told you that I was square, um, that's kind of confusing, but it isn't really, because nobody or many people are not aware of their orientation to whom and to others. And so I have an orientation toward cooking and sewing and other kinds of things, house things. And I'll have to blame it on my mother because she made me clean it up, you know. But so I met this woman, and we were compatible. And she was Connie, my former spouse. I've only had one. Um, and so we went to a Lutheran church, and we finally separated, in part because the two of us never talked about who we were oriented to. It's nice for me to say that Connie is married to this fine woman that she met when she went to Chicago to work in a book studio. So I haven't found anybody that I really have wanted to make any commitment to. Either that, or I'm just committed to myself, and so I can be a hermit, and that's fun. I'm some of the best company I know, and if you want to be company, I'd certainly try to be company with you. So the pictures.
Yes.
This is a gathering of, as you can see, a lot of white t-shirts, and the white t-shirts have, there are three images there. And this is a celebration in the early 90s, 1990, I think, at okay, now it's coming back. We were in the Carolinas. We were in North Carolina for a Lutherans Concern meeting, and it was after the ordination of Ruth Phyllis and one other man who I have a picture of in another place. I'll get to him later. This is my mother and my stepfather. They were married for 27 years. My mother had been married to my father for 25, and then she had another relationship in between that was, well, I didn't approve. This is my mother, and these two dressed up people are thespians.
Okay.
My daughter went to McAllister. I call it McAllister. This is her husband, and this is my daughter Ely. Her name is Elizabeth, but she goes by Ely, which is what she chose, and it's her husband. And he and I are not necessarily on speaking terms. I guess that's why I can't remember who she's married to.
Oh.
Anyway, I always say to her, what do I say to her? Say hi to, and I know I'm blocking on his name. So here I am at 4 years old.
Oh, you were a cute little guy.
Thank you. My mother made that. My mother worked for the Singer Sewing Company, and she learned how to do clothes. Here's a picture of my first clergy-related appointment. I was the administrative secretary and the bookkeeper
Pull it down a little bit. There you
for for this Methodist church that was just up the street from where I went to church. And it was just mornings. And she finally fired me because I wasn't doing what she wanted done.
Santa.
Yes, yes.
I didn't know you knew him.
I do. I did. So this is a picture of my older brother, and I'm in the chair in the front. And those four pictures on the back, that there's a window there, and there are pictures on either side. Those are my Norwegian ancestors. Actually, my grandmother and my grandfather, and then his uncle and aunt, his uncle and aunt, I guess, who came to America with him, and then they went back to Norway. So that's part of that part. And I grab it. Where am I? This is my sewing project. It is a vest and a button holder. I think I've worn
Very
it to
nice.
mark a couple times. On the inside, it's sort of a conservative outfit. There is a little bit of braid along the side, but it's pretty conservative. And
Very nice.
at any rate, so I was able to put this together. And when I saw this material, there was only one other coat that I could think of.
Joseph.
Joseph, yes. So, where to go? Where to go? Here it is. Oh, I passed. Did I show? I showed you. Did I hold up? I didn't. Then we'll get to the last one here. This is Ely Wood and Bill Wood. This is my daughter at her wedding. I'm there. And so just the two of us, you know, she has a mother and her mother was there. And so it was all happy, but it was really a great dinner. They did the ceremony themselves and they had the dinner, and then we all got a picture taken out on the veranda, and it was fun.
Nice.
This is a copy of the picture that my grandmother had in her house. There was an artist, and there's some other pictures similar to this done by the same artist. There was an artist from Norway who painted pictures, and this is North Fjord, where my grandfather came from. So much for that. Now, probably the most significant thing comes from this picture. This is the Reverend Jan Tobias. This is, on the other end, Annette. I should say the Reverend Annette. She was a member of a congregation in Milwaukee.
Mm-hmm.
Sandy over here was the associate with this other guy with the sweater on. And the two of them were the campus pastors at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. The man in the blue shirt is Jeff Johnson, who I couldn't remember the name. Jeff was ordained at the same time as Ruth and Phyllis in 1990. And I believe Jeff is still serving a congregation in the Bay Area.
Okay.
And then I'm there with that vest that I had on.
Mm-hmm.
And between us all is Virginia Malincott. Virginia Malincott came to Milwaukee to do part of a board. Jeff was there as a seminarian, and Virginia Malincott wrote the book, Is the Homosexual Your Neighbor? If you want to love your neighbor, can you love the homosexual? And Virginia wrote the book, and then it was revised or updated with some other information. So there's more than one edition. Virginia Malincott passed away, died last December or in January. And I was going to pull up some things. I do have a lot of information on her, and I probably could talk about anything anywhere. That's one of the things that I try to keep up on with the sources and other things.
Well, we really appreciate you sharing so much of your life with us.
Just that little scratch.
Well, now people might want to contact you and say, hey, I want to learn more.
Yes, yes. I'd be happy to, well, make some food and come by. Or I don't have a very large abode, but I have a wonderful deck, as the vicar and her spouse are aware of. And it will be deck time soon because it's getting warmer.
Yes.
So that's a little part of who I am.
Thank you.